In my 20s, I thought I was doing everything right with my health. I was eating clean, working out, and doing all the things you're supposed to support your body. But I actually didn't have a period for years. Looking back now as a nutritionist, it's honestly kind of obvious what went wrong, but at the time, I had no idea. So in this video, I want to walk you through the things that I thought were healthy that actually backfired and weren't supporting my hormones at all. Now, for context, I'm a clinical nutritionist and I focus on women's hormone and mental health. I've spent years figuring a lot of this stuff out for myself, so everything I'm sharing today comes from my own 20-something experience. And if you're wondering how old I am currently, I am 35. So 20s were not just yesterday. Most of the stuff I'm going to talk about is about a decade ago for me now. But what really prompted me to make this video is that over the past decade, I've also worked with hundreds of women, and I'm quite frankly just surprised by how often these patterns still are reflected back to me. And the reality is that the longer someone stays engaged in these particular nutrition-related patterns, similar to what I'm going to cover today, the harder it is to recover later, especially when it comes to hormones. So I just want to share my biggest lessons to hopefully save anyone else some time, frustration, and regret. So let's talk about lesson number 1. It's important to note for not just this lesson, but the entire story, that I was on birth control through my late teens and early 20s, probably about like 7 years or so. And it's also important to note that I had been a vegetarian and then a vegan for a significant period of time before coming off of birth control, and shortly after, which we'll talk about. I think I became a vegetarian when I was in my teens, and then I went vegan like pretty early in my 20s. So I had been vegan for at least several years by the time that I came off of birth control. So I come off of birth control, and what happens when I come off of birth control is that I actually end up getting horrific acne, which happens to a lot of women. It was very distressing for me because I actually had never even had acne before. I didn't struggle with acne growing up in high school or anything. And so I immediately started researching what was happening, trying to figure it out. But the more distressing part of this was that I didn't get my period back either. So it felt like everything just suddenly fell apart, but looking back, it actually wasn't sudden at all. So lesson number 1 is that birth control was masking what my body was trying to tell me. Our cycles are a vital sign of feedback. If I hadn't been on birth control, I would have seen this pattern earlier, meaning I would have seen all of the other lessons and patterns that we're going to discuss today earlier. My body was underfueled and stressed for several years, but I had no way of actually knowing this because I was getting a period and nothing physically seemed off. I actually see this all of the time. Women stay on birth control thinking everything's fine, then everything breaks later. And while this video is about nutrition-related lessons, the first one regarding birth control is so important. Without this being at all about the pros and cons of birth control or my beliefs about birth control, the fact is that it does mask a lot of things. And so that's just something to be aware of if you're on birth control, is that you might not be getting a full picture of your hormonal health because you're not actually having a natural cycle. Okay, so this leads directly into lesson number 2. So I believed that I was eating the healthiest way possible. At the time, for me, that was a vegan diet. We'll maybe discuss my history with the vegan diet more in another video, but the point is that for me, this aligned with what people refer to as clean eating. Lesson number 2, or mistake number 2, was thinking that clean eating meant healthy. Clean eating can definitely mean healthy, but clean is a very vague and subjective term. People use the word clean that are on paleo diets, vegan diets, and everyone defines it differently. But the point is that the perception of clean eating, whatever it is, it turns into moralizing food. It's an invisible standard that you're trying to live up to, and the common thread is that this type of way of eating equals virtue. And a lot of times when people think about their diet in this way, or they're striving for a perception of clean that is virtuous, it leads directly into lesson number 3. So I start having acne, and I assume that I have a ton of food sensitivities, and I start cutting out gluten, dairy. I double down on restriction. And remember, I'm actually still vegan at this point. So this meant that I ended up eating a lot of legumes, a lot of beans, lentils, foods that are incredibly hard to digest. And I actually started having digestive issues at this point. So I thought I was fixing the problem, but I was actually just removing more and more foods. Lesson number 3 is focusing entirely on elimination did not solve my problem and actually led to more issues. In my case, this meant more nutritional deficiencies and digestive problems. I actually see this all of the time. People list everything they avoid as a cause for clean eating. And while there's nothing wrong with that, a lot of times I'm like, WTF, like what are you eating? It actually doesn't really tell me anything. It actually just tells me more about what holes we may need to fill. So I was still vegan, and because I had eliminated so many things, I was following what I now refer to as bird eating. This resulted in not enough calories, not enough bioavailable protein, etc. And this is also where another problem comes in, is that I was still exercising regularly. Lesson number 4 is that I was drastically underfueling and didn't even realize it. This is probably one of the biggest root issues in my 20s. My body didn't have enough energy to support hormone production or likely neurotransmitter synthesis because I had gotten pretty depressed. And I've mentioned this in a few of my other videos, is that when I was vegan after several years, I had just gotten used to my mental health, and I thought that it was a personality trait of mine, that I just kind of didn't care about anything, felt apathetic all the time, and was low-key depressed. But that was actually just a reflection of my physiological health and probably my diet as well. Okay, so this lesson is hard. It's hard to hear because I think we all do this in various ways. So I knew something was off when I didn't get my period back in a realistic time frame, like maybe 3-6 months later. I started researching and listening to a lot of content on what is called hypothalamic amenorrhea. This is a condition, sometimes it's called female athlete triad, where what's happening is that the energy expenditure output is greater than the input. So what basically happens is that the female body shuts down reproductive hormone function, making hormones, fertility, because it doesn't feel like it's going to have enough energy to birth a child. This does not mean that someone has to be like drastically underweight or even underweight at all to have hypothalamic amenorrhea. It's really more about the difference between energy output and input. So someone could even be overweight or trying to lose weight, be dieting for a specific period of time, have a lower calorie input than output, body perceives it as a lot of stress and they lose their cycle. Okay, so I recognized what was happening. I recognized that this had probably been going on for years and that, remember, birth control was masking the symptoms, but I still didn't fully change my behavior right away. Lesson number 5, mistake number 5, is I tried to cheat the system instead of fixing the root of the problem. I'm going to give you examples of this because when I did this, I would convince myself that I was still trying to fix the root of the problem, right? I tried various things for my acne. So I tried like medications like spironolactone and all these other things where I thought like, oh, if I could just fix this, then this other thing I can kind of keep doing. Or one example is once I even knew that I had hypothalamic amenorrhea and I was actively trying to eat more calories, change my diet, I started going to yoga because previously I'd been doing like high intensity interval training and I knew that it was too much stress for my body. So I start going to a yoga studio with the intention of like, this is going to be a more gentle way to move my body. But of course it's hot yoga. And of course I go to one of their like yoga boot camp classes and then I get addicted to that for like 3-6 months, etc. The point is like I was trying to change things in various ways, but in other ways I was still in denial. I thought I could have my cake and eat it too. I thought I could find some kind of system where I could maintain various aspects of what I was doing that ultimately were foundational and not working for me. This is extremely common, especially in the fitness world, and women who really identify with being healthy and have a lot of physical output goals, whether it's like running marathons, weight training, etc. And what people will do is kind of delay this problem until fertility becomes their biggest concern. There's no judgment here in terms of delaying something if you don't want to worry about it right now, but I think we do have to be aware that we're not just delaying, sometimes we're like digging our ditch a little bit deeper. So because I was so into this hypothalamic amenorrhea world and I was trying to like engulf myself with people who had similar issues and keep myself motivated to make changes, I would often hear stories from women that either would go back and forth between these worlds, like kind of try, then give up, and or women who would just delay dealing with this until they did want to have children and until they did want to get pregnant. And for some women, bam, had no issues. But for a lot of the women, they would spend an additional several years now trying to balance their hormones. And that's a lot of years lost. So for me, even though that this ended up being about so much more than fertility, it started there. Ultimately, this was more a journey about better hormone health, getting off my vegan diet, which drastically changed my mood and how I felt. When people do have goals related to reproduction, this is just something to take into consideration. So lesson number 6 is a lesson that I wish I learned in my teens. I mentioned that I didn't feel better until I came off of my vegan diet. I had been a vegetarian before that. So why did it take me so long to try something else? Well, being vegan became a part of who I was. It was part of my ethics, belief. It was part of control for me as well. I think control is a factor that goes into a lot of people who, diet quite frequently or just use food as a matter of control. And that was definitely me. I basically had to get to the point where my digestive issues were so bad that I needed to try something new. Like I didn't want to end up with irritable bowel disease. And the reason why I had to get to that point is because I had wrapped up my identity in my diet. Lesson number 6 is that I had wrapped up my identity in my diet. And this is the biggest challenge that I face as a nutritionist trying to help others. There are so many circumstances where someone has a medical condition where they could eat in a way that's going to better support their physical health, but the actual barrier is not the food itself, not likes, dislikes, or the ability, like food sensitivities, to eat this or that. It's very strong beliefs, not just about food, but about how those choices psychologically play into their identity. And listen, this is a spectrum. There's a lot of scenarios in which identity or identifying with something is very beneficial. Like if you identify with being a healthy person, then maybe you're not going to stop at that fast food joint, right? So there are a lot of ways in which connecting yourself to a behavior and an identity are helpful. But when identity becomes so ingrained and rigid, there's a lot of defensiveness, there's resistance to change, and often an unhealthy relationship with food develops where it consumes your life. And the more it consumes your life, the harder it is to let go of. One thing that I've learned to be true about nutrition is not just that it needs to be personalized for every individual, but that it's often ever changing. So similar to being an open-minded person who grows and changes in general, where just because something worked for you for a while doesn't mean it's going to be forever, nutrition works in a similar way. Our bodies change, our priorities change, our circumstances change. It's okay to have a North Star, a compass, beliefs that we stand by, but the biggest positive changes I've ever had in both my health and my personal life is when I was actually able to recognize that my North Star or current North Star wasn't leading me to where I wanted to be anymore. And this leads into lesson number 7. This is the most important of all the lessons to me and a reflection of all of them put together so far. So in my teens and early 20s, my life revolved around food, my body, control. I struggled with eating disorders in high school, and even when I got past that in my early 20s, I was still always in this constant optimization cycle, and I missed other areas of life. Looking back, I thought I had purpose, but I was really just stuck in a loop. Lesson number 7 is that I confuse my obsession with health with purpose. You can care about health without it consuming your life, and a lot of people do, but it can also be an avoidant behavior. It goes back to that control component that a lot of people struggle with, and their outlet is just health. But there are so many things that I wish I spent my time on now instead. Yes, my journey led me here, but that doesn't mean that I don't have legit regrets. I am someone, when it comes to the regret aspect, when people say, no, I don't have any regrets, and they infer that that means they wouldn't be where they are without all the same decisions, I think one can acknowledge that yes, where you're at likely had to do with all those decisions, but one can still have regrets and things that they learned from. Whew. Okay, sorry, my computer died, had to get the cord. So yes, my journey led me here. I did get my period back, but it actually took several years. It wasn't until my upper mid-20s, I think it was like 27, that I got my period back, and I think I went off of birth control at like 24. So it was almost 3 years. It took that long, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And still to this day, I care so much about nutrition for hormone and mental health because I have a pretty sensitive system, and I think that part of my history has a lot to do with that. So hopefully this video provided you with some perspective, and if you're interested in learning even more about how to fuel your body without it, of course, turning into an extreme obsession regarding your physical and mental health, then please subscribe or check out some of the other videos on my channel, and hopefully I'll see you in one of those.